Thank you again to everyone who's joined us so far for this webinar. It's our third in a series called Roots of the Soil, and it focuses on land succession issues, particularly for socially disadvantaged farm families. My name is Paul Jones. I manage the National AgrAbility Project, which is headquartered at Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. We're very thankful to have a wide range of presenters today. We have Jim Coleman from Coleman Crest Farm in Lexington, Kentucky. Elora Spate, who is director of the Socially Disadvantaged Farmers and Ranchers Policy Research Center at Alcorn State University. April Love, who's a policy analyst, also with the Socially Disadvantaged Farmers and Ranchers Policy Research Center at Alcorn. Tamika Peoples from Peoples Foundation, and also John Jamerson from Taste of the Garden, LLC, and Legacy Farming and Health Group. Again, I'm the manager of the National AgrAbility Project. It's just one of the organizations that's presenting the webinar today. For those that are not familiar with AgrAbility, we do focus on issues of disability in agriculture, and we're sponsored by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Every one of the AgrAbility projects around the country is a partnership between a land-grant university and at least one nonprofit disability services organization. And there are currently 20 state projects around the country in addition to the National AgrAbility Project here at Purdue. Our partnership on the National AgrAbility Project includes Goodwill of the Finger Lakes, the Osteoarthritis Action Alliance, Colorado State University, and Washington State University. If you want any more information about AgrAbility, please visit agrability.org. We have a wealth of information, including more than 90 archived webinars that you can check out at your leisure. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to John Jamerson. And if, John, you would like to unmute yourself and give your welcome, we would welcome your welcome.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you, Paul, and glad to be here today. I'm John Jamerson with Legacy Taste of the Garden, the project manager for the 2501 grant that Legacy Farming and Health Group and AgrAbility have joined together to put together. With our 2501 grant, part of what we do is to introduce, to increase participation and initiate participation with socially disadvantaged farmers with the USDA grants, with their different programs, scholarships that they have. And so we're glad to be here today. Just want to thank the other panelists that are here, and thank Jim Coleman, who's my special guest today that's on here, and the other all the other panelists. Right now, I'm going to pass it to Tamika. I just want to make sure that you guys also understand that our group, the Legacy Farming and Health Group and AgrAbility, will also be having other conferences that we'll be doing this week with the National Black Farmers Association, and also the following 2 weeks after that with North Carolina A&T. Tamika.
Oh, thank you, John. Thank you, team. I'm really happy to be here. Again, thank you so much for having me, Paul. I'm Tamika Peoples, founder of Peoples Foundation, a veteran nonprofit organization, and 1/3 of the partnership for the 2501 grant and National AgrAbility and Legacy Farming and Health Group. You know, we work together to make sure we're bringing tools and resources to socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers across the nation. We do that in partnership with National AgrAbility Project and Legacy Farming and Health Group. And we really look forward to today's third-part session of our land succession planning series. And we actually plan on continuing this session. But we really welcome all of our speakers, and thank you so much for your time today. Certainly, Alcorn State has been gracious enough, Dr. Elora Spate and Ms. April Love, who's going to be presenting details on the socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers Policy and Research Center and the amazing work that they're doing to make sure that our farmers and ranchers are able to maintain their land and pass on their land and things they should know about with respect to the most recent 2018 Farm Bill. So again, thank you to all the panelists. Thank you for having us today. And I truly look forward to the presentation. So I won't belabor the point, and I look forward to all the great information. I hope you guys receive it well.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to put it into the slideshow, which will pop up there in just a moment. I wanted to take you through the history of my farm. I'm Jim Coleman, and I'm the current owner, fourth generation owner of Coleman Crest Farm, one of Kentucky's oldest historic African-American family farms. And it's exciting to be here today. I really appreciate the opportunity and the invite by John and Paul. Tamika, I will need your support over the next 25 years and everybody else on the call to help me with the next phase of what I want to do with the farm. And then I'll also explain to you what I'm looking at on the succession options. To start off with, it's located in Fayette County, about 8 miles away from downtown Lexington. And this is the land that my great-grandfather purchased in 1888, March 27th, 1888. It's today a 13-acre farm. It starts off with Booker T. Washington created the Union Benevolent Societies in the late 1800s, and it allowed African Americans to be able to purchase land all over the United States, mostly in the southeastern part and the Midwest. And we had a Union Benevolent Society set up in my community of Town, which is kind of like the Wakanda of its days. It was a primary African-American town, had a lot of land owners, and what they would do with the Union Benevolent Society is they would pull together their money and they would make loans to each other because they couldn't get loans from the regular commercial banks due to Jim Crow laws and the discrimination that was going on at the time. And so they could use the money to either purchase land or to bury a loved one. My great-grandfather was on the board. He was also a member of the church that it was connected to, so he was able to get a $1,200 loan from the Union Benevolent Society to purchase the land that he and his family had tilled as slaves. My great-grandfather's wife, her name was Lucy Coleman, and they purchased the farm from John and Mary Darnaby, and my great-grandparents raised 4 sons and 2 daughters, a total of 6 children on the farm. And they owned the farm from 1888 all the way up to 1910. And at the time of my great-grandfather's death in 1910, he died intestate and left it to his 6 children, of which some of them kept their parts and some sold their parcels off and moved to the city of Lexington. The 2 parcels that we have today are owned by John and Molly. That was one of his sons, John, and also Sam Coleman and Effie, his wife. And so John and Molly raised a total of 7 children. From 1910 to 1949, they owned the farm. And during the Great Depression, because they now own land, you can see this is a picture of them in their house. Because they own land, they were able to use the land to get loans and to collateralize it to be able to get the loans to send their children to college during a very, very difficult time in the country's economy, as well as when African Americans didn't have a lot of rights. But it gave them the opportunity to participate in the American dream of being able to educate 6 out of 7 of their children. You can see them there at the bottom. That's the evening that my parents were married. That was on April the 4th, 1950. You can see it looks like they're the Kennedys, all established and very successful. And that is a direct result of James Coleman making the decision to purchase the land. You know, he had 3 big decisions, by the way, in 1888 when he decided to buy the land. He could have said, look, there's no place for me in America. 2, he could have left Lexington and gone to Liberia. We had an ancestor that did leave our family farm. His name was William Coleman. He and his mother, they left when he was 11 years old. He later became the 13th president of Liberia. Henry Clay in Kentucky, he was our congressman, and as well as the Speaker of the House, formulated the American Colonization Society that allowed all free blacks that wanted to leave America, they could leave. And William Coleman and his mother left. He became the 13th president of Liberia. The 3rd option was to seize the moment and to stay here in America. And that's what James Coleman did. And then 2nd generation John and Molly took over raised their 7 children. And then the third generation was my parents. They went to Kentucky State. Last year was their 70th anniversary of graduating from Kentucky State. They were married in 1950, and they raised a total of 5 kids on the farm, with me being one of them. Then they were the third generation owners. And then my mother became ill in 2001. My father passed away in 1989, and my mother took over the farm all the way up until 2001 when she came down with cancer. And my wife and I were scrambling to figure out what are we going to do. My brothers and sisters didn't want to buy the farm. And my wife, Kathy, that you see there in the picture, she and I met at Howard University, got married in 1984. And Kathy encouraged me to buy the farm, even though we didn't live in Lexington. We lived far away in New York, and we've been in New York for the last 20 years, and I recently moved back to Lexington to restore the farm. But we purchased the farm from my mother in 2001. It pretty much turned into a forest. And so over the last 3 years, I've gone through and renovated the farm. Unfortunately, I lost my wife, Kathy, on April the 3rd this year. She passed away with breast cancer, and last year was probably one of the best years of our marriage because we worked well together, we planned for the future, and we tried to beat cancer, and she encouraged me all the way to still hold on to the farm and to do the best I can to help others, to be able to replicate the James Coleman moment of giving them the power of one, buying land, and being able to transform the lives of over 300 of their descendants, which is what happened for my great-grandfather, is that by him buying that farm, more than 300 of his descendants over the last 132 years have had a chance to go to college, some directly as a result of owning the farm. Certainly all of John and Molly's kids went directly as a result of the farm, its proceeds and the loans they took out, and it also paid 100% of the cost of my tuition to go to Howard University. And so my goal is to teach others how to have the James Coleman moment of being able to learn about agriculture and to be able to expose them to the practical side of the business so that they can go out and justify to a local bank the money they need to be able to purchase their own land and to be sustainable and to have a good income and to have land to be able to use it to collateralize loans, to do whatever they want to do, to buy a house or to send their kids to college. The next pictures that you're going to see are Coleman Crest over the last 132 years has simply been a place of pride, celebration, and empowerment for over 300 of his descendants. All of the people that you're seeing here on these photos are all of my uncles and cousins and relatives, and we would get together every year on 4th of July to celebrate the farm and to celebrate America and just to see each other and to be at the farm and to have a good time. Those are a few more pictures. And again, all of the people that you're seeing, they've all gone to college. Many of them are in fields of medicine. The young lady that you're seeing down there who's looking up at the giant spokesman for the family, his name was William Wingfield. Her name is Salam Coleman, and she is a top executive in Hollywood, one of the 20th most powerful individuals in Hollywood today. But all of them are very successful as a result of this farm. I now am focused on completing the renovation on the farm. I'm going to be building a new house out on the farm, and I'm also going to be launching a Coleman Crest Farmer Incubator program that's designed to help young people, especially disadvantaged youth in Lexington, to be able to come out and learn all about farming. I'm working with Lexington Police Athletics League, and they're going to help me to work directly with one of our high schools, Martin Luther King High School, that is a juvenile delinquency school, and we're going to work with them to invite those kids to come out and learn about farming. I'm also working with Kentucky State as well as the University of Kentucky to invite their interns to come out and to learn all about farming. And so this is the way the farm looked when I was growing up. That's the house that I grew up in when, you know, from 1950, my parents purchased this house and built it for $10,000. I recently had it demolished so that I could make room for the new house because it had asbestos on it. It cost me $17,000 to have it taken down. The things that I learned about agriculture when I was growing up at Coleman Crest, my father came home one day after my brothers had gone away to college. He said, you know, you're in charge. And this was I was 12 years old in 1972. And he told me, he said, your job is to take care of the farm. He worked at the post office and did a lot of other jobs. And he said, I need your help to be able to oversee the farm when I can't. And here's just an example of what I learned and that I want to teach others about sustainability in agriculture. We had a lot of pigs, probably way too many pigs for the size of farm that we had. And we could only produce so much corn, so we had to also go to southern states to buy additional grain for the pigs to keep them fed. Because it was a large cost, my brothers weren't providing them with, you know, a lot of corn from southern states because of the cost, and they would break out. And so instead of having them breaking out every single day, I just tripled the amount of feed to them, and they stopped breaking out, and they got pretty large pretty quick, to where my father came up to the barn one day when I was feeding the pigs. He said, look at yonder, these are the biggest hogs we've ever had. I said, I'm doing my job. He said, you're doing your job, but you're going to break us. And I said, well, Daddy, why don't we get rid of the hogs? He said, you can't really get rid of the goose that lays the golden egg. And I said, well, what are you going to do? He said, well, I've got to come up with something because we can't keep feeding these hogs all this expensive corn. It's going to break us. And so 2 days later, he came back up to the barn while I was feeding hogs, and he told me I just solved the problem. I've worked out a deal with the Saratoga restaurant, which is a great, cool restaurant in Lexington. They had a big problem where they had these big oil barrels full of slop from all of the, you know, food that was left over from their guests. And the city would only pick it up once a week, and so they had it backed up in the kitchen. And my father asked them, well, how much are they charging to have it picked up? And they said $5 a barrel. And he said, well, how about if I pick it up every day to get it out of your way and just pay me the $5? And they agreed to it. And our pigs, you can see, just exploded in size because they were getting all the food that we all eat and that we all enjoy and that they enjoy. So much so that after about 3 months, they stopped eating it. And we had now backed up slop. And so my father had me going up and down the road talking to other farmers. I found one farmer that took all the excess slop, and they purchased it from us for $5 a barrel. And by the time I was 17 years old, my father took out a note. Half of the cost for Howard was paid for by a note. Howard at the time cost $1,800 a year. My father put a budget together for 4 years, which was $10,000. He took out a note on the farm for $5,000. And we had saved up to $5,000 with all the proceeds from the hogs and all the tobacco and the other things that we sold from my time of managing the farm. And so this is something that CEOs are trying to do, whether you're at IBM or Google or Apple. You're trying to figure out how do you increase revenue and at the same time eliminate cost. And this is exactly what I want to teach and what I want to get back to doing at our farm here at Coleman Crest. I want to focus again on these young people, millennials. One of the hottest fields for millennials right now is getting into farming. They want to try to figure out how they can be free. And they have three big barriers to getting a farm. One is they don't have access to the land, so they can't learn how to become farmers. Two, many of them have student loan debt, which makes it impossible for them to get the financing to be able to purchase a farm. The third is they don't understand how to run a profitable business. And so the Incubator is going to be available to help them to do and to remove those barriers. We want to help, again, to replicate the James Coleman success story. We've got a major stake in wanting to produce the next generation of farmers for Kentucky. We recognize that farming is a critical role in maintaining healthy, productive resources and making sure that our citizens are healthy. And we just want to be good stewards of our land for Coleman Crest. My goal for 2030 for Coleman Crest is that not only are we a teaching farm, but we're also an ag tech innovative center that is designed to create a lot of excitement behind technology, create a lot of good jobs, and a lot of good opportunities for our citizens here in Lexington, Kentucky, especially our disadvantaged youth. And I also, because there have been 4 women who've been crucial in the last 132 years in saving the farm, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, and my wife, I also want to be dedicated to helping women to get into farming as well. This is the universe. Again, we're looking at about 12.3 acres. I want to have 10 acres available for farming. We're going to design half-acre plots with the goal of being able to show others how to produce $75,000 in gross sales per half acre. And so we're going to employ this spin farming model, which is small plot intensive farming. And then we want to focus on high value, high demand crops that can turn at least 3 times a year. And that would be lavender, leafy greens, flowers, spices. I already right now have a great customer that's interested in buying okra. And I've never raised okra, but the customer wants it. And you can't beat having a customer before you start planting. And so it's really going to help the farm. We're also working again with UK, University of Kentucky, and Kentucky State, and because I don't have a facility on the farm, the local church that I grew up in, Underground Baptist Church, has agreed to hold training at the church until we have a facility on the farm for training. This is pretty much the Incubator curriculum. It covers everything from new orientation, safety training, record keeping, business resources, crop planning, bookkeeping, marketing. We want to show them the full focus of what it's like to be a farmer, from planting the seeds to harvest to marketing to counting the money and managing the farm like a successful business that it is. The goals that I have for succession. Kathy and I, we didn't have any children, so it's a little bit of a concern. I've got some nieces and nephews that may be interested long term once we can kind of get it back up and running. They didn't have a chance to grow up on the farm like I did, so they're not as close to it as I am. But, you know, we may be able to find a kid that's interested through the Incubator program, or a student that goes to UK or Kentucky State that long-term might find an interest. But the bottom line is I hope I live another 25 years so that I can keep the farm successful, keep it exciting, and to attract talent from people who may want to either buy it or to take it over at the time that I die. By 2025, I want to establish $1 million foundation that will support the annual operating cost for Coleman Crest is one option that I'm looking at, as far as establishing a Coleman Crest Trust along with the board that would include family members as well as agriculture professionals, both in the business sector and the academic sector, and to have them to be able to have this foundation along with the proceeds that could be produced from the farm to be able to have the farm as a working farm in perpetuity. I've already had meetings with Kentucky State as well as the University of Kentucky. I've met with both deans. They're very excited. The University of Kentucky, their dean came up and had a meeting with me at the graveyard of my ancestors, and she is just thrilled about the opportunity that she sees of being able to help others to get educated about real estate. The farm, again, is only about 8 miles from downtown, about 6 or 7 miles from the University of Kentucky, making it easy for her students to get to the farm. And she's very interested in the idea of taking over the farm as a working training farm at the time of my death, and to have it in my family's name in perpetuity, and to have this foundation set up to where we can always transform lives and create the power of one for others in Lexington, so they can have 300 or 400 of their descendants over the next 100 years being successful just like my family has done. And so my goal is to make this a good working farm and a great asset for our community. It's an exciting time, and it's highly relevant to do this because people are wanting to find ways to be both healthy as well as to be wealthy. And so it's going to be a focus of generational wealth and generational health that we're going to be focused on over the next 25 years at Coleman Crest. And so again, I want to end it here and answer any questions that any of you may have. And it's been a pleasure sharing this information with you today.
Thanks so much, Mr. Coleman. We appreciate all that information. Sounds like a great vision and a great history. We're going to go ahead and turn things over to Elora Spate right now for a part of the presentation. If you do have questions, feel free to go ahead and enter those into the chat. I know we've gotten at least one so far. So, Dr. Spate, you go ahead and take over for now.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. So I just want to say, Jim, Jim Coleman, what an excellent example of generational wealth and community support. So what I want to cover, okay. Okay, great. So my purpose today is to introduce you to if you're not already familiar with the Disadvantaged Farmers and Ranchers Policy Research Center located at Alcorn State University. All right. So the Policy Center was authorized in the 2014 Farm Bill. And it is a national center with a strategic focus in the 18 states with 1890 land-grant universities. And I mentioned it's located at Alcorn State University in Lorman, Mississippi. So the only stipulation in the 2014 Farm Bill was that the Policy Center, as we call it, had to be located at an 1890 university. So Alcorn State then, in response to a request for proposals from USDA, was awarded the grant to establish the Policy Center. So it has been up and running for a little bit over 5 years now. It is staffed by myself and 3 additional full-time employees. We have, and April is on the line, and April Love, who is our policy analyst, and we have a research analyst, Kanisha Hackett, and a program assistant, Rosalind Turner. And so the majority of the work then is done through contracts and subawards. And so why was the Policy Center created? It was created to be one voice, if you will, for socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. What was happening was there were different groups, minority groups that were coming before Congress, and the message was not always consistent. And so they wanted a Policy Center established so there would be a go-to place, if you will, for community-based organizations, the land-grant, universities to go to represent then a consistent message in terms of the needs and challenges faced by socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, and to ensure that what was brought to them was data-driven information and based on research. And so I, as the director of the center, report to the president of the university. So the center then is a priority, for Alcorn State and the other 1890 universities. And I have a dotted line relationship with the Dean of Agriculture there. And the mission then of the Policy Center is to conduct research, analyze policy, and make recommendations seeking to achieve equitable and economic integration of USDA programs and policies for socially disadvantaged farmers, ranchers, communities, and rural landowners. And the vision then of the center is for it to be the premier authority for information on the history, current conditions, trends, and future projections of socially disadvantaged farmers, ranchers, and communities. And so we have 4 primary areas of focus at the center. So stakeholder engagement, active research, policy development, and strategic outreach. So the Policy Center, as I mentioned, also has an advisory board, and is chaired by the president of Alcorn State University, so Dr. Felicia M. Naves, and there are currently 23 members there, and it is very broad, diverse representation. So we have 4 1890 universities with members, 3 1862 universities, 2 1890 executive directors, 4 community-based organizations that represent socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, 1 agribusiness. So the most recent addition to our board was a representative from John Deere. We have 6 farmers at large, and here what we tried to do was to make sure we had farmers representing that had large farms, small, limited resource farms. We had young, old, anyway, a diverse representation of the farmers. And then we have 3 national leaders. Most of you probably recognize or know Lloyd Wright, who is retired Civil Rights Director at USDA. We have Mike Espy, who is a former Secretary of Agriculture as well as a current Senate candidate in Mississippi, and then a representative from Tougaloo College. So also with stakeholder engagement, we are currently working with at least 65 community-based organizations. And I mentioned the 1890 and 1862 universities. We have what we call a technical working group. So it is a group of representatives from the 1890 community and from USDA to make sure that when we put forth policy recommendations, that they are technically sound. We also take our recommendations first to the Congressional Black Caucus, and they in turn then take those recommendations to the House Agricultural Committee. So the second area is active research. So we have 6 priority research areas. We started out with 4, which is the impact of current agricultural policy on socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, land loss among African American farmers, participation of socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers in USDA programs, and access to and use of technology. We later added 2 additional areas, youth programs and pipeline, and community and urban agriculture. So the third area then is policy development. And here in policy development, and April's going to talk a little bit more about that, but it is a collaborative process to develop and prioritize recommendations. And I mentioned we provide those recommendations to the Congressional Black Caucus, and they in turn send them to the House Agriculture and Ranking member of the committee. We participate in Farm Bill hearings and listening sessions, and we meet with Agricultural Committee members and representatives. So the fourth area of focus is strategic outreach. And so we don't do, if you will, the typical outreach that the community-based organizations. Our outreach is primarily focused on policy. So we travel around and meet with socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers to determine what are the issues and challenges that you're facing or being faced by them, and more importantly, what are the policies that need to be put into place then to correct those challenges, if you will, or minimize those challenges. I'm sure many of you have heard, well, we can't do that because of policy, or this policy won't allow us to do that. Well, again, our job is to take what is a hindrance and turn it into a good thing, if you will. And so we have been to all states with 1890 universities, except for West Virginia, Delaware, and Ohio, and they're on the agenda, for the next year. And we have received input now from over, actually, 4,000 socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. And primarily, our education is on policy and on the Farm Bill. Okay, our priorities then for the rest of 2020 and 2021 in policy development is to continue to engage in the rulemaking process for the 2018 Farm Bill. As it relates to heirs property, all of those items in the Farm Bill, and specifically relending, have not been fully executed. The Uniform Partition Act, we work with states as they enact the Uniform Partition Act, hemp production, medical marijuana, and then I mentioned that we participate in USDA listening sessions. Another priority is to execute the 2023 Farm Bill planning process, a focused area to make sure that we have all of the information that we need and that we have research studies that can support the recommendations that we want to move forward with. All right, and so we plan to hold regional meetings. And so initially, those meetings, until we can get beyond COVID-19, will be virtual meetings. We are in the process of sending invitations to participants of both community-based organizations and land-grant universities. And here, as I mentioned, we want to continue to collect what are those issues and challenges that are being faced, and then what are solutions that we need to put forth policy recommendations. Strategic outreach for 2018 Farm Bill, we continue to provide training and tools for community-based organizations and land-grant extension staff. We have Matrix, which April will mention, and are in the process of developing fact sheets to supplement the USDA fact sheets. Stakeholder engagement, our objective for the next year is to increase participation by the land-grant universities with the Policy Center. Our research priorities, we are currently working with the Southern Rural Development Center at Mississippi State University, and we at the Policy Center have representation on both the policy and legal teams and the research teams. And the Mississippi State Center is leading the effort. There's an heirs property planning team. So the focus is specifically on heirs property and what are those things that we need to do to increase legislation in this area. I want to mention that there will be a National Heirs Property meeting, the second annual one, led by the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. Again, this, I believe, will be a virtual meeting in December, and if you have not already received information, you should be receiving information on that, and it's available or will be available on their website. So the research studies that we have recently launched related to heirs properties, we are funding research at Tuskegee University, Auburn University, the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, and Lichen. We have also recently funded Tougaloo College rolling out a leadership development program for rural communities. Also funded crop-based acres and payment research, looking at the differences in payments to Black and white farmers. And that's being led by the National Black Growers Council. Okay, additional research studies, Pickford debt relief for excluded farmers and the public release of socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers participation. We will, in the next month, be issuing 2 additional requests for proposals, one related to access to credit, the other one related to broadbanding. All right, I'm going to turn it over to April now so that she can provide some information on heirs property.
Okay, so I am going to do a follow-up to what Ms. Spate has presented and just kind of go through the heirs property portion of the 2018 Farm Bill and just explain some of what the Policy Center has contributed to the 2018 Farm Bill in this area. So the first question that you have to ask yourself when seeing the words heirs property, you have to ask yourself, what is heirs property? And so heirs property is home or land that has passed from generation to generation, and there is no legally designated owner. And so the ownership is divided amongst all the living descendants in the family, and it is very necessary to know that this division is based on percentage and not the actual land. And so this can create a couple of problems. That's why there should be a focus on heirs property. An estimated 60% of farmland and ranches ranches owned by socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers has been classified as heirs property, or maybe not classified as heirs property, even though it is. This form of ownership is unstable, and it can limit the owner's ability to qualify for USDA programs and obtain financing for things that they would like to do on their farm. The issues surrounding heirs property ownership has contributed to the decline in Black farmers. The number of Black farmers was at its peak at 1 million between 1910 and 1920. And now we're on a decline with under 50,000 farmers making up 1.4% of farms as of 2017. And so going into the actual 2018 Farm Bill as it pertains to heirs property, the first thing that you want to look at is the eligibility section. And so the Secretary was deemed to be required to provide for the assignment of a farm number to operators of heirs property land. So that means even if the farmer was operating on heirs property and couldn't prove the ownership of the farm, they should still have an assignment of a farm number. Documentation that became eligible depends on whether the state has adopted the Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act. This is a property rights law that some states have enacted and some states have not, as Ms. Spate said previously, that protects the owners of property, heirs property, and preserves their independent right to contract. Continuing with eligibility, if the farmer is in a state that has adopted the Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act, they must provide documentation in the form of a court order that verifies that their land is actually heirs property, meaning that it has met the definition as it is defined in the Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act, the long one. Or a certification from the local recorder of deeds that the recorded owner of the land is deceased and that at least one heir has initiated the procedure to retitle the land. If a farmer is in a state that has not adopted the Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act, there's got to be a tenancy and common agreement approved by the majority of owners. There's got to be tax returns of the farm operator for the 5 preceding years. There has to be a self-certification of control of the land and basically any other documentation that is required by the Secretary. Moving on to relending, which is a completely different area. The Farm Service Agency Guaranteed Lending Program, the Farm Bill in 2018 authorized the Farm Service Agency to loan funds to qualified intermediaries to relend to individuals and entities seeking to resolve heirs property issues and obtain a clear title to farmland. So basically to help those people resolve these issues. The eligible entities to do this included cooperatives, credit unions, and nonprofits that met certain requirements. The main purpose must be for relending by eligible entities for projects that assist these heirs in resolving their ownership and succession issues. So we made at the Policy Center recommendations to USDA in these areas. Provisions to stop the decline of socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. We wanted to assist socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers with their property management, so wills and estate planning, very important. We wanted to revise policies to enable active producers to access federal farm programs for use on heirs property. We want to secure waiver of policy that will make socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers eligible for USDA programs and other services. And we wanted to provide low-interest farm ownership loans to families to resolve their heir property issues by buying out other heirs. All of this information that I have given you may seem like a lot, because it is. But I do want to say that if you are having issues in these areas, the Policy Research Center on our website, located under Alcorn State University's webpage, we do have an heirs property matrix, which lists out the different questions that you may have pertaining to heirs property by each state. And it's very important that you look at your specific states, because each state has different laws concerning heirs property and property as a whole. And if you are continuing to have issues after you've looked at that, you will need to seek out legal representation, so an attorney in your state that is licensed in your state. And if you have any additional questions, I'm writing them down, and I can get the answer to them and get your answer back. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. We're going to back this up. We have basically a couple questions for each speaker plus a couple of comments, so that worked out well. This was first comment that came in for Jim. Was a recommendation to look for young and new farmers from the National Young Farmer Coalition. So,
thanks a lot. I'll write that down.
Okay. And then we do have a couple of questions. Will you or do you have visitors to your farm?
I sure do. Anybody that would like to come to Lexington to do a tour of the farm, absolutely. I'd love to have you there. I'm open to all ideas. We are going to also be doing a lot of different agritourism events starting next year that will include farm education, camping, celebrations of organic farming, showing the community how to raise organic crops, whether if you've got your own backyard or your own farm. So absolutely stay tuned. I've got a website that is currently in the development, should be ready in about 4.5 weeks. And news will be out. And I'll send it to Paul so that we can have it distributed out to everyone who joined our call today.
Great, great.
And I do already have a website. If you want to, reach out to me. The website is ColemanCrestFarm.com.
ColemanCrestFarm.com. Are you selling or leasing?
No, I'm not selling the land. I do want to make sure it's clear. I hope before I die, one of my nieces or nephews takes it over. And if not, then, because I really like the ideas that I heard from April today about how to help them to finance it. That's a big issue. This has happened a lot over the last 132 years for my farm. When my great-grandfather passed away, he died intestate, so it was left to 6 of his heirs. 4 of them sold their parcels immediately, left us with 2. So you can see how it happens. It started off at 60 acres. Today it's 12.3. And so when my grandparents, when they died, my father did this whole idea that April talked about on the retitling. I found out about that by going into Lexington Herald. They call it the colored notes. It was at the time in the 50s and 40s and 30s, African Americans couldn't be on the front page of the Lexington Herald, but they had this one page that was dedicated to African American news called the colored notes. And so I did a lot of research and saw that my father retitled the property and working with his 6 brothers and sisters to hold on to the 2 parcels that we own today. And if he didn't do that, the farm wouldn't even exist. And it was a lot of work. It's very difficult. Tensions come up working with family members, and I'm amazed at the work that he did to get that done. But I don't want to sell the farm. I'd like to sell it to a family member, whether it's a niece or nephew or a cousin, or I'd like for it to be a descendant in our family. But if that doesn't happen, then at least I will set up a foundation to make it a not-for-profit with a foundation money to be able to cover it in perpetuity with my wealth management company, as well as with a partnership with the University of Kentucky to make it a working farm in perpetuity where family members could still be involved. The leasing part, interestingly, I do have the first individual that looks like she's going to be my first incubator farmer. As I shared with you all earlier, I'm looking to help disadvantaged, preferably minorities in Lexington, to be able to learn about farming and to be in the incubator program, as well as to help women to get into the incubator program. And interestingly, the first candidate looks like it's going to be a lady who is a descendant of the previous owner, who also owned the land and was the landowner when my great-grandparents were slaves on the farm. And so it's interesting, after 132 years, it's a story of reconciliation in that you have the slave, a descendant of the slave owner, setting up, getting ready to do a lease with the descendant of the slave. And only in America could that happen. And it really is a story of reconciliation. She and I both are excited about it. And it is going to be a great story, especially during these very difficult times. But I will be leasing parcels out, like 1/4-acre lots and 1/2-acre lots, for the incubator farmers. And those leases will be short-term leases from anywhere from 1 year to 2 years to give them the opportunity to learn about farming, make a profit, get customers. And when they leave out of it, my goal would be that they would know how to get a loan to be able to buy their own farm like James Coleman did.
Great. Okay, I think those, for now, were your 2 questions, Jim. Go on to Ms. Spate. Does the SDFR Policy Center deal with issues on Native American lands or tribal lands?
So we have, so we have not specifically. We are familiar with some. We work with some of the community-based organizations representing Native Americans, and so we have not specifically dealt with issues. But if some are brought to our attention, that's certainly something that we can work with.
Okay. And let's see. You have a website for us to access to get this data. And this question came in when you were talking about your policy or research priorities. So I'm assuming that, is there a place where somebody can access more information about those priority areas?
Yes. So on Alcorn State website, under Discover Alcorn, there is a link to the Policy Center's website. And so for each of our 4 focus areas, there is information related to how to access our completed research studies, what the planned ones are, and we're in the process of updating it, but because the university is moving to a new, anyway, they're updating their website, but regardless, you can access the data, or if there's something specific, just send either one of us, myself or April, an email, and we'll see that you get the data.
Okay, great. Great. Okay. Next question came in while April was talking. If a family establishes a land trust, would that protect a family's land?
So that's one. And April, I'll take it. So a land trust is one of the potential solutions, if you will, to heirs property. And so what happens, the land, if you will, is titled. A land trust is set up, and it is the trust that is the titled owner, if you will. And so decisions, it allows the family to be able to participate in USDA programs then because there is a clear title. It is the trust. And so there is trustees and, without going into a whole lot of details, but it is the trust that makes the decisions then related to the land. Okay.
And I think Paul just put the website you referred to in the chat, didn't you? Okay. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
This next question, I think you just kind of referred to, and I think Jim also talked about, but what is meant by the term retitled land as related to heirs property?
And so just that it really is titled, if you will, because what happens, the way heirs property was created, because the individuals that were on the title, great-grandma and great-grandpa, died then without then retitling, if you will, the land to, living relatives. And so to retitle it, whether it's in the trust or is sold to other heirs, then either through a relending program, bottom line, it creates the title there. Because the challenges with heirs property is that there is no clear title. So to retitle it is to give a living person title or person's title to the land.
Okay. Okay, I think this was a request for Paul. He would like to, would like to be able to see your receive the slides, and I'm going to pass it over to Paul anyway, because that's the end of the questions that I have, but I think another one or two came in while we had this screen up, so we'll let him address that, and hopefully he can read the questions that came in while I've got my screen locked on the other part. So.
Okay, yes, again, we are planning to post presentations in the archives of the webinar, which you'll get a link to. Had a question for Dolores and April. Have you begun working with anyone from the newly formed USDA Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production? There's very little information about that program at this point.
And so the question is, so I know the person that is currently heading up, they haven't done a whole lot yet, to my knowledge. I stay in contact with them, and so, but as they start to roll out or identify, yes, we will be working with that office. And we have given them input. That was part of the feedback from those listening sessions in terms of what is needed. And there are a number of things that we have received from urban farmers that they would like to see come out of this office.
Okay. I did have a question about how to contact people in specific states. Well, this particular one was in Arkansas, but do you have any general advice in terms of who best to contact in different states about heirs property and what types of research might be going on in those different states?
So the short answer, I would say, is just send us an email. But one of the things that we're doing, and April mentioned, I think, we, on our website for the Policy Center, we have actually created a matrix then for, each state. So you can go to the state and to find out then what are the, how is succession, in that state, and what are the state laws. And now we have a disclaimer that says that this is a starting point, and, it is not to be used in lieu of an attorney, but it is a good starting point then for information related to that state. And so part of that will include resources that are available for that given state.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Just one more comment from Penn State Extension, Lancaster, for those that live in Pennsylvania. They're the #1 county for young farmers, have a large number of preserved farms, lots of interest in increasing diversity efforts, so they appreciated information that was shared today. That's all I have in terms of what was in the chat. I will just also add my thanks and appreciation for everybody that presented today. I think we've got some great resources, and again, the archive should be available hopefully the beginning of next week, so you can go back and review anything that you might have missed. So again, for everybody here at Purdue and the rest of the Life Group, we say thank you to our presenters today, and thank you to everyone who participated, to all our attendees also. And so we wish you a good day.
Great.